John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory,
Welcome to War of the Rebellion, Stories of the Civil War. I am your host, Leon, and this is a reading of the regimental history under the Maltese Cross Antietam to Appomattox, the Loyal Uprising in Western Pennsylvania, 1861 to 1865, campaigns 155th Pennsylvania Regiment, narrated by the rank and file. And we're picking up right after our illustrious 155th Guard, and moving on to the Battle of Fredericksburg, by Henry F. Weaver, Corporal, Company B. It is early in the morning on the 13th day of December, 1862, near Fredericksburg, Virginia. The morning is misty, and the air is cold. We have hurriedly made our coffee. The cannonading from our heavy guns on the east side of the Rappahannock River, in front of the town, has not been so heavy as yesterday. But one or two sharp volleys of musketry to our right indicate that a portion of the infantry is engaged. We are camping in a ravine. We do not know exactly where, but we do know that we are near Fredericksburg, that a battle is in progress, and that we may be ordered into action at any moment. Our division changes its position to what appears to be a large plain, from which we can view the enemy's batteries and a part of the town of Fredericksburg. It is apparently from 1.5 miles to 2 miles from our position to the Rappahannock River, which is between us and the town. As the day wears away, the big balloon, which has made frequent ascensions during the day, is hauled down and packed away. The enemy's smaller batteries are now being served rapidly, and replied to vigorously by ours, while an occasional volley of musketry is heard. As the noise and din increases, the order comes at last. Fall in. And we are about to meet the enemy for the first time. As we are massed to hear orders, we hear for the first time the voice of our division commander, General A. Humphreys, addressed to us as a division. "Soldiers," he says, "you are the reserve division of the army. Yonder," pointing to the rebel batteries, "are the enemy's batteries. It remains with you to go in and take them, and the day is won. Forward!" There's a feeling of pride and confidence in the general's voice, and as he finishes speaking and gives the order, cheers greet him, and a good feeling is at once established between the, quote, "veteran and imperturbable commander," unquote, and his division. Having never been in action, what our general says seems comparatively easy of accomplishment. Ah, how soon we are deceived. Double-quicking to the river, we reach the pontoons. Shells and the enemy's bullets greeting us as we run down the bank. Some of our men are wounded. The rebel batteries shell us as we cross over on the pontoons, but the high river banks on the side next the town prevent them from getting the right range of the pontoons. Consequently, we reach the town with comparatively small loss. Our brigade, under the command of Colonel P.H. Allabach, one of the 131st Volunteers, advancing hurriedly up the narrow street, our colonel, Edward J. Allen, is ordered with 2 regiments, the 155th and the 123rd Pennsylvania, to advance out one street, while the other 2 regiments of the brigade, the 131st, Colonel Allabach, and the 133rd Pennsylvania, Colonel Speakman, in the order named, move out another street, and, forming in line of battle, join us on the left, the brigade being thus reunited outside the town. Advancing then out the main road westward, where the sounds plainly indicate the battle is in progress, we file off to the left, into a street or road but little used. Halting there but a few moments, the rebels commencing to shell us, One of the missiles, passing within 18 inches of the colonel before it struck the ground. We file again out into the main road, and, crossing a mill race, form in line of battle back of it, having as yet escaped but with slight injury. The order is now given to fix bayonets. But to our astonishment, no order to load is given. Advancing a short distance, we halt in front of a cellar apparently recently dug. There comes our first realization of war and battle. Outside of the cellar, and lying on the earth thrown from it, are our killed and wounded. The piteous appeals of the latter being enough to appall and shock the stoutest hearts unused to such scenes. We would fain help them, if we could, but a rigorous and relentless enemy in front is engrossing all of our thoughts and time now. We advance across what seemed to be a plain of some 200 or 300 yards in width, followed immediately in the rear by the 123rd Pennsylvania, Colonel John B. Clark. Our line is broken by the cellar, and a fence extending from it some distance westward, and we are somewhat confused, but soon, however, reuniting to the left of the fence. Nothing could be more perfect than the line of the 4 regiments as they advance, the 155th being in the front, closely followed by the 123rd, and the 131st, and 133rd regiments to the right at close distance. We have been in many dress parades and regimental drills, but have never in any of them seen a more splendid formation than that which now presents itself, as the lines advance with their colors, those glorious colors of the Union and the state of Pennsylvania. As we double-quick, charging across the plain, cheering, the enemy increase their fire on us. Some drop out, killed and wounded. Still, the line closes up and advances until we come to a slight rise in the ground, where we find lying between us and the rebels a line of men 6 deep. Our alignment being broken by these lines of battle, which we understand belong to Couch's division, we halt, while our division commander rides like one furiously mad between our lines and those of the rebels. His son is severely wounded, also several others of his staff, among whom is our well-known comrade, John F. Hunter of Company C. The bullets fly as thick and fast apparently as the drops of rain in a heavy shower. We are ordered to advance. 3 times does our colonel, Edward J. Allen, in the face of a murderous fire, rally us to the crest of the hill within a few yards of, and where we can see the stone wall beyond, with a ravine or ditch between us and it. And 3 times we are forced to abandon the attempt to take the stone wall. Strong in itself, and protected by a sunken road running alongside of it, we fall back, lie down, load, and rise and fire. Grape, canister, and many balls are poured into us from the enemy's artillery and infantry. We are, in a sense, powerless. While our regiment escapes to some extent the full force of the terrible artillery fire, owing to the range being a little high, after the fact that the rebels have withdrawn their batteries to the right of our front, from which they poured a merciless crossfire upon the 123rd and other regiments of our brigade, which suffered terribly. Captain Lee Anschutz of our color company, Sergeant Thomas Weissman of Company C, Charles Bardeen of Company F, Francis Thompson of Company I, John Rankin, Jr., and George W. Bratton of Company E, all of our color guard are mortally wounded, and many of our bravest and best are killed or wounded. Our messmate, Henry Kaner, is killed by our side, and so on through the entire division. Night is coming on, and as its shadows deepen, we reform and fall back to the position from which we started, near the mill race, and after night fall back to the town, where we replenish our ammunition and return to our original position near the mill race. Under the cold, dreary December sky, we make our beds on the damp ground and sleep our first night on the battlefield. Day breaks. It is Sunday morning, and we are expecting to be ordered forward again. We have no means to make our accustomed cup of coffee. It is dangerous to move, the enemy's sharpshooters being on the alert, and every little while we hear the sharp ping of their bullets. The day passes on, and there are no signs of renewing the battle, except occasionally some desultory firing here and there. That is all. Night approaches, and as the darkness veils the earth, we march back into the town, where we stay all night. The next day, Monday, before daybreak, recrossing the Rappahannock, we are soon back to our old camp again, our first fight over, having been literally a baptism of blood. For us, the division having lost 1,760 killed and wounded out of 4,000. When shall their glory fade? Uncle John Mackin's War Experience by Private Charles F. McKenna, Company E. Just before the disastrous Fredericksburg campaign, under Burnside, Mr. John Mackin, a highly esteemed citizen of Pittsburgh, who for many years had held the important position of flour inspector for the city of Pittsburgh, in gratification of his own desires, and more especially of those of his wife, determined to relieve the homesickness and tedium of camp life of his son, Color Corporal John H. Mackin, serving in Company F of the 155th Pennsylvania Volunteers. Uncle Johnny, as he was affectionately called by the public, had no sooner conceived the idea than he determined to put it into execution, believing that through a personal acquaintance with Secretary Stanton, who had been his attorney during the residence of the latter in Pittsburgh, he could overcome the red tape regulations prohibiting civilians in the army in active campaigns. He armed himself with letters from Honorable Charles Shaler, ex-judge, and Stanton's former law partner in Pittsburgh, Congressman J. K. Moorhead, and other prominent citizens of Pittsburgh, to Stanton urging the favor of allowing Uncle Johnny to visit his son in the 155th Pennsylvania Volunteers. He knew Assistant Secretary of War Thomas A. Scott so intimately that he dispensed with letters to him. Mr. Mackin's subsequent experience on visiting Washington, as reported by him, was exciting and amusing, though resulting in success in his final promotion to the rank of colonel, etc. After considerable maneuvering and strategy, he succeeded in finding the location of General Halleck, then General-in-Chief of all the armies of the United States. Halleck was noted as a pompous military martinet, who, though he had never commanded a squadron in the field, was, because of having written military treaties, placed over all the generals of the Great War doing effective fighting in the field. In derision, Halleck came to be nicknamed Old Brains. After much trouble, persistence, and red tape, Uncle Johnny finally reached the War Department office of this man of greatest rank in the Army. Uncle Johnny, on confronting Old Brains, who was standing by his desk in full regulation uniform, at once greeted the latter's cold glances by remarking, quote, "I hope I see General Halleck," unquote. General Halleck at once sternly replied in indignant tones at this presumptuous intrusion of a civilian, quote, "You may see him if you have eyes, sir," unquote. Uncle Johnny, nothing daunted by this insolent reception, modestly preferred his request for a pass through the army lines to visit his son, serving at the front in the 155th Pennsylvania Volunteers. General Halleck bluntly refused to entertain the request, informing him that General Burnside's army had orders to move on Fredericksburg, and that, under no circumstances, would any civilian be given passes to the front. The manner of Halleck, on refusing the request, added to Uncle Johnny's disappointment. Suppressing his chagrin, however, he next sought the presence of Secretary of War Stanton, to whom his letters were directed and with whom he could, if afforded an opportunity, recall a friendly acquaintance in former years. The approach to Stanton's official quarters was even more difficult of access than it had been to reach Halleck's headquarters. Uncle Johnny, however, persisted in his efforts to gain an audience with Secretary Stanton, and after being interrupted by numerous guards at the many corridors, he finally reached the outdoor chamber of Stanton's department. He refused to give a card or depart with any of his letters to the black messenger offering to deliver them, but insisted, in his anxiety, in forcibly accompanying Stanton's messenger into the latter's sanctum. The noise and confusion between Uncle Johnny and the messenger, resulting from the latter's unsuccessful attempt to keep the former from intruding, attracted Stanton's attention. Before Stanton recognized Uncle Johnny, he ordered him out and denounced his intrusion by force. Mackin, however, held his own in the discussion with the War Secretary and made him recall his identity. He next presented Judge Shaler's letter, with others in behalf of his mission to visit his son. When the excitement had somewhat subsided, Stanton had Uncle Johnny seated, and a short intermission from public business was had, which was devoted to a reminiscence of Stanton's early days as a young lawyer, when Mackin, in addition to being one of Stanton's first clients, was also his family baker, often paying Stanton's fees with the product of his bakery. On the object of Mackin's visit, however, Stanton was immovable, and could see no way to grant the pass or to reverse General Halleck's refusal. Disheartened, but not devoid of hope, and as a last resort, Uncle Johnny determined to hunt up Honorable Thomas A. Scott, the Assistant Secretary of War in Washington, and through the ties of warm friendship in Pittsburgh, ascertain if there was not some way left out of the difficulty of securing a pass to the front to see his dearly beloved son. The conduct of Colonel Scott, when reached, was in marked contrast with that shown a troubled parent by both Stanton and Halleck. Colonel Scott told Uncle Johnny he should have sought him first, and that he should have known how rigidly the regulations prohibiting passes to civilians through the lines to the front would be enforced by both Halleck and Stanton, owing to the fact that the army was about to move to battle. This was the very reason for which Uncle Johnny desired to see his son, lest he might never behold him alive again. This argument, and the further declaration of Uncle Johnny and his wife, in bidding him farewell on his mission to Washington, had warned him that unless he succeeded in visiting their son Johnny in the field, that he himself need not return home, had the desired effect on Colonel Scott's affectionate heart. The final solution of the embarrassing problem presented to Colonel Scott was solved by him, by the appointment of Uncle Johnny Mackin as Chief Inspector of United States Military Telegraphs in the Army of the Potomac, with the rank of colonel, without pay. This placed a corps of black laborers with a skilled man as Superintendent of United States Military Telegraph Corps under the new colonel. Thus commissioned, under direction of Colonel Scott, Colonel Mackin's corps took passage aboard a steamer for Aquia Creek Landing, Virginia, the base of supplies of the Army of the Potomac. The army was then camped at Falmouth, preparatory to the attack on Fredericksburg. Supplied with horses on landing, Colonel Mackin's party rode to the headquarters of the army in the field, reporting in person to General Burnside. Proper quarters were assigned Colonel Mackin and party. Supplies of rations also were ordered to be furnished him by the commissary department. The Superintendent of the United States Military Telegraph Corps proceeded to discharge all the active duties of the position, while the new colonel was, by request, granted an indefinite leave of absence to visit his son, Corporal John H. Mackin of the 155th Regiment Pennsylvania Volunteers. Being well known to Colonel E. J. Allen, commanding the 155th for many years prior to the war, in Pittsburgh, as also to Colonel Kane, Major Pearson, Adjutant Montooth, and nearly half of the regiment from Pittsburgh, Uncle Johnny's visit to the camp with news from home was most welcome. He became the guest of Colonel Allen during his leave of absence. As the orders to march across the Rappahannock on the pontoons on the afternoon of December 13, 1862, reached Humphrey's division of 8,000 fresh Pennsylvania troops as a forlorn hope in the day's assault upon Mary's Heights, there stood Uncle Johnny Mackin, in the line of the column by the side of his son in the color guard, with a borrowed musket in his hands, determined to serve in the ranks in the coming action. As the first half of the regiment double-quicked down Stafford's Heights to the pontoons, Colonel Allen, noticing Uncle Johnny marching in the ranks with his gun, sent a guard back to conduct Uncle Johnny to his presence at the head of the regiment. Colonel Allen, having prohibited him earlier in the day from arming himself or going into the battle, regarded this action of Uncle Johnny's as disobedience of orders, and accordingly had the guard disarm him. Colonel Allen, however, granted the disappointed Uncle Johnny permission to accompany the regiment to the pontoons, crossing the Rappahannock, and there at the entrance to bid goodbye to his son in the ranks. By the time the regiment had reached the foot of the hills to take the pontoons, the enemy's artillery had opened a heavy fire on the 155th and other regiments deploying to the pontoons, so that Uncle Johnny's wishes up to that point to be under fire were gratified. His son, Corporal Mackin, left the double-quicking ranks of the regiment as it reached the pontoon across the Rappahannock, to give his aged father, who was in position on the roadside awaiting him, a farewell embrace and kiss, and then join the ranks to continue the journey to the harvest of death awaiting the forlorn hope in the assault upon Mary's Heights. This son escaped the missiles of the war in this disastrous engagement, only to receive serious wounds in the assault at Little Round Top, July 2, 1862, and finally his mortal wounds, while still serving as the color guard in the first day's Battle of the Wilderness. Burnside's attack upon Fredericksburg, having resulted in disasters to the Union arms at all points, a midnight retreat evacuating the town was ordered, the troops all to resume their old camps. Uncle Johnny Mackin reached camp in advance of the regiment. He had fires lighted and a most welcome breakfast of hot coffee, with baked flapjacks and other delicacies, ready for Corporal Mackin and all of his mess on reaching their old quarters. The writer being an invited guest at the feast. How the United States Military Telegraph Corps subsequently succeeded without a chief inspector's services is not known. But one thing is plain, and that is that the object of Uncle Johnny's persistent efforts to visit the army to see his son was accomplished most thoroughly. And that is the end of our today's episode. Next week we will be reading In the Enemy's Lines After Chancellorsville by Robert P. Tuglass, Private Company E. And now, on to our notes. Let's talk about this most depressing episode. Oh my goodness. I liked last week's better. Oh my goodness. But this is pretty short notes, so I think this is probably one of the best descriptions of the Battle of Fredericksburg that you'll find, I think anyway. I know others exist, but I really like the play-by-play, the way that it is written, almost like you're reading somebody's journal, right, as it was happening. The experience, the speech from General Humphreys, how splendid and beautiful the division looked, with the flags waving through the air in divisional formation, right before it was all torn to pieces and shattered forever. Oh, and that Henry Kaner, his messmate, was killed right by his side. Henry Weaver's, that is. Just brutal. I feel like this is only the start of the sadness in the regards to many of these stories. But to read a first-hand account of the battle and how it was fought as the last assault is just incredible. I'm glad it was preserved. Now, Uncle John Mackin, on the other hand, now that's a pretty great story. If only his son had survived, it would make a perfect time life story. I can only imagine what a modern version of it would look like. A dad trying to talk to the Joint Chief of Staff or something, and then giving up and barging into the Secretary of Defense's office. I just don't see it happening nowadays, but, just him giving up and being gifted a fake rank and a job by an undersecretary to go out and literally just go be a dad. Oh, it's wild. Very interesting. Wild times, the early days of our country. Wild times. Great stories, very interesting. Sometimes, even after I read them, I go back and just listen to them again, just to really soak in the writing. Because sometimes it's just crazy insane. And it's hard to process it all because it's so scary. I try to imagine what it would be like, and I can't because the military operates on such a small level in comparison. We don't need to get an army of 100,000 people together in one location. We have trucks, vehicles, and we can spread them out all over the place. So I never saw 8,000 people. Never saw a division of 4,000 all at once. At the most, I think I ever saw was a brigade level. Maybe someone who's in the army saw something different. Maybe saw more people than that, but I never did. So it's crazy to think about. I thought it was cool when we would have all the different companies working together in an op. You look at that and you're like, dang, this looks so cool. I can't imagine doing that with thousands of guys all at the same time. It's just wild. It's so alien, but it's incredible when it happened. So hopefully I will be able to make it out to Fredericksburg. That would be great just to walk. I know there's a lot of houses there now and a bunch of other stuff, but it'd be really cool just to be able to walk over the same ground that they're talking about and walk up to where they couldn't. That would be neat. All right. Well, with that, I'm sorry it's a shorter episode, but Patreon episode comes out Saturday. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this, it's Friday. Patreon episode will be out the very next day. But with that, take care. Hope everyone has been staying out of the wildfire smoke. I know I have been trying. It's not always worked. But stay safe. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, while weep the sons of bondage whom he ventured all to save. But though he sleeps, his life was lost while struggling for the slave. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. John Brown was a hero, undaunted, true and brave, and Kansas knew his valor when he fought her rights to save. And now, though the grass grows green above his grave, his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. He captured Harper's Ferry with his 19 men so few, and frightened old Virginia till she trembled through and through. They hung him for a traitor, themselves a traitorous crew, but his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah, for his soul is marching on. John Brown was John the Baptist, of the Christ we are to see. Christ who of the bondman shall the liberator be. And soon throughout the sunny South the slaves shall all be free, for his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. For his soul is marching on. The conflict that he heralded, he looked from heaven to view on the army of the Union with its flag red, white, and blue. And heaven shall sing with anthems o'er the deed they mean to do, for his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. For his soul is marching on. Ye soldiers of freedom, then strike while strike ye may, the death blow of oppression in a better time and way. The dawn of old John Brown has brightened into day, and his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. For his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. For his soul is marching on. For his soul is marching on. For his soul is marching